Bruh. Hello, gamers. Oh. Sorry about that. The light is very low today in London. It's also very cold. Oh. So, how are you on this fine Monday morning? Well, Monday afternoon for me, but morning probably for somebody else. I'm sorry, I keep track of... I stopped keeping track of the time of the day. It's just pointless at this point. Basically, I'm always at home, and I very rarely see what's outside. So, I do hope you have had a really good weekend. My weekend was mostly spent relaxing. Not doing much, to be honest with you. Oh yeah, I spent it doing like releases and last minute fixes for the GNOME 42 beta release. We're close now. The GNOME 42 release. It's gonna be next month. Yeah. We have the API freeze. We've had the API freeze technically on Friday. Well, Saturday-ish. And then we have a code freeze on the first week of March. Hi, Georges. Oh yeah, I noticed that you landed the well, the calendar port, but also I've seen the announcement that the next version of OBS will be published on Flathub, which is really, really good. The version of OBS is gonna for Linux is gonna be upstream, well, released upstream on Flathub. So it's really, really good news. We're going to get the official brand on the Flathub page. Yeah, good. It's been a great thing to follow on the issue tracker and everything else. It's really good news. Thanks for your work on that, Georges. I've also gotten a few new followers here on Twitch and on my YouTube channel because people have been asking about the what's it called, the how to get started with GTK and GNOME development on Reddit, so on the GNOME subreddit. So 75% of that was other people's work. Oh, come on. Just 25% is a lot more than anybody else's. So honestly, come on. Don't downplay the fact that you've done an incredible amount of work. It's good to have more upstreams on, well, on Flathub, but also having more upstreams involved in packaging using Flatpak. And I say that from both like a community perspective, but also from a very selfish perspective, since I basically switched full time to Flatpak application. I rarely, if ever, these days install something on my Fedora installation if it's not uh, in Flatpak form. So having OBS coming from directly from upstream, it's a great thing. Now I can rely a lot more on that. Also, the Firefox installation is coming from upstream. I'm not using the Fedora one. The Steam Deck announcement that they use Flatpak. Yeah, I think so. I mean, what else are you gonna use? Honestly, I mean, there are no other well-integrated sandboxed mechanisms. You only have Snap, which is really not for desktop applications anyway. It still has a lot of problems with desktop applications. And what else do you get? App image? I don't think so. So I think from like an ISV perspective, that an ISV that is not associated to any of the major distributions or platforms these days, then Flatpak is pretty much the only choice. Yeah, we use the orbital mind control laser to convince everyone to switch to Flatpak. Just like we used it to convince everyone to use GNOME. Of course, there are no other environments, and nobody uses them, even if there were. Clearly, it's GNOME that has the monopoly on mind control these days. I mean, it's just that a lot of people confuse the technical aspects with the social and network effect aspects of this thing. You cannot just drop a technically superior solution, well, whatever, and then expect everyone to pick it up, because that's not how the world works. Steam Deck official Flatpak badge. Yeah, I think so. It will be the game-changing feature for everything. Being able to actually know, well, there are like, I think it's a network effect of like a few things. One is, yes, devices. So phones using Flatpak for applications, a bunch of distributions converging on Flatpak for I'm gonna say third-party applications, but mostly it's Leaf nodes inside the dependency graph, and also the more official ISVs using Flatpak and using Flathub, and finally the ability to have a direct way of monetizing or in general establishing a way to donate or pay an application distributed on Flathub using Flatpak will be the final piece of the network effect that makes Flathub and Flatpak a lot more interesting from the perspective of ISVs in general and application developers. Because right now it's really hard to say, oh, we have an app store that people can use and for distributing their application, if there is no way to compensate that that effort. So yeah, maybe it's the thing that changes, that pushes everything in the right direction. I mean, I've always been kind of optimistic about the Linux environment, even though it was entirely undeserved at points. But yeah, at this point in time, we can probably, I don't know. I think we can probably solve the third-party application story at this point, which means having more people using Linux and more people moving to Linux. We still haven't solved the first party and the system development problems that we still have. So that one is still going to be a massive question mark. I mean, it would be nice to ensure that the people making the low-level software stack that lets everybody else contribute their own application basically make that people able to sustain their effort. But it's complicated and it's entirely unsexy. It's the same reason why accessibility is entirely unsexy and underfunded and essentially an afterthought in the current Linux landscape. It's really hard to get any kind of funding for that because people don't see it as a problem, really. Don't see it as something necessary. And the only people that actually contributed to it in the past were corporations because they needed to tick a checkbox. A stream together. It could be fun to do a stream together, yes. I'd have to check how to do it. I know a bunch of people doing streams use stuff like Discord or like a voice chat, and then it's integrated inside the Twitch or inside YouTube or whatever. Could be doable. I mean, at some point, I think somebody in the GNOME community wanted to make like a kind of podcast or like a roundtable kind of discussion stream. That would be interesting. It's it's, I don't know. Another interesting thing would be like if people have questions or if people have like want to ask about anything related to GNOME and free software and whatever, they can we can do a Q&A stream. I don't know. By the way, thanks for joining us, Jorpan. It's I don't know. It might be an interesting thing to do. I'll have to ask around. I'm pretty sure that some people will be interested to hold it. It's not a bad idea. Yeah, I'm still here doing documentation and tutorials and stuff like that, so it would be good to have some diversity there. Oh, hi, Josis. One podcast per release. it could be interesting. It could be interesting to do a review, like a 6 months in review for the releases. As usual, it kind of takes time. I'm able to do this this stream because I'm working on documentation. I'm working on libadwaita and stuff like that. Thanks to the foundation for a contract. Before that, I decided to do this stuff mostly because I'm not currently working for anybody. And before that, I was writing the History of GNOME podcast because I was at home and I didn't have anything else to do. But it takes a lot of time and effort to prepare for that. So, yeah, the engagement team would be the person to ask, the people to ask for something like that. I think Shri wanted to do that, but as usual, it's complicated to organize stuff in a limited time frame, and also across the world, especially because people are going to be busy at the end of the cycle doing release stuff. So we might have to do it after the release. But it would be interesting. Yeah, we could organize something like that. I'll poke Sri and I'll poke the engagement team and see if we can get some time for people to chat about the release and what has been done during the past 6 months. Maybe try to get Alan on board, or I don't know, somebody from the design team, somebody from the release team, and see. Also because, so one of the things that we do every WADEC, every year, is have the team report during the annual general meeting of the GNOME Foundation. So every team inside the GNOME project presents what they've done in the past 12 months, essentially. And it's a really good chance to get an overall idea of what are people doing, like the localization team, the design team, the release team, the documentation team. But the past 2 WADECs, I think, since they've been held online, we haven't had a proper AGM, and we haven't had the team report, like the blog. It's hard to do that online. Lots of moving parts. So maybe we should have a podcast about that, or a stream that does that. So a little bit of a report from various teams, and they talk about what they've been doing. It's an interesting idea, and I think it would be interesting for a lot of people that are not involved with the GNOME project, but they are interested in seeing what we do. So yeah, maybe. Also, I don't know if anybody has seen the news, but the current executive director of the GNOME Foundation, Neil McGovern, has decided to step back, and the foundation will have to find a new executive director. Neil has been instrumental over the past 5 years to ensuring that the foundation could get more contributions from donors and more involvement from other commercial and non-profit entities, and he has done an incredible amount of work to make the foundation grow and not just be the piggy bank of the project. So it was able to hire more staff in the foundation. So we had an event manager finally, and we had a sysadmin for both GNOME and Flathub, and we had more people working on the overall set of tasks that the foundation is overseeing. So kudos to Neil for his incredible amount of work. Full disclosure, he was my boss, so but he was a good boss. I look back fondly at the work I've done for the foundation last year, and the year and a half before that. So I was able to work for the foundation on GTK for 2.5 years, and it was a great time. And mostly is because of him. So yeah, we'll see what happens with the foundation next. Who are we going to hire as the new executive director? What is going to be the direction of the foundation after that? But hopefully we are going to get more contributions and more funding, so we can increase the ability of the project to not just be reactive, but also to drive more the landscape of the Linux desktop, but also in general the Linux ecosystem. So yeah, kudos to Neil for his work. Right. So what are we going to do this fine Monday? Well, I have written... let me switch to the desktop view. Sorry about that. Right. I was working earlier today on the saving files lesson of the Getting Started tutorial, which is the next to last session. So for today, I wanted to finish this and then finish the saving the application state lesson, which shouldn't take long, to be honest. Then I would probably go over a couple of other bits of the previous lessons, so I can properly link the other tutorials. But I also noticed, well, I got a couple of messages of feedback on the current tutorials and the current developer documentation website layout, and one of them was that it's a little bit unstructured. I've tried, so to be fair, I've tried to make it a little bit more structured, so you can always go from the let me see here. You can always go from, if not the landing page, which directs you to the design or to the design guidelines, so the HIG, or how to get started with Builder, or how to get started with Flatpak. But also you get to see the programming languages, the list of components of the platform, and the general developer documentation and the tutorial. But if you land here, you get a content overview, which is the platform introduction. Then you have the guidelines and tutorials. So if you go to the platform introduction here, you get a list of components for the GNOME platform libraries and services, a list of language bindings, an introduction to Builder, and an introduction to Flatpak, which is fine. Then you go into the components, and then you have to drill down again to libraries, and then you have a long list of libraries. They are divided by rough field of use. So you get user interfaces, you get the GTK, libadwaita, WebKit GTK. Then you get fonts and rendering, which is kind of important, but not as important. And image loading, you get pixbuff and librsvg. We should probably include Gaggle there. So if you're writing an image viewer or anything that manipulates an image, you should never be used GTK pixbuff. librsvg is very limited to SVGs, but if you want to load images that are bigger than like 1024 by 1024, then you want Gaggle. Firefox 98 beta is available in Flathub beta. It then creates Portal and dark mode. My Firefox from Flathub, which is not the beta, I guess it's 97, but it already integrates with the dark mode on the entire system. Oh, that's great. I'm still running GNOME 41, so the dark mode for the entire system isn't a thing. But as soon as GNOME 42 is out, I will upgrade everything. But then we have like 2D drawing Cairo. I have no idea why we have an entire section on 2D drawing with Cairo, but whatevs. We have file system access and file and operations, gfile, which is okay. IPC, gdbus, okay. Multimedia, gstreamer. We will probably want multimedia to be a little bit higher than this. Definitely higher than fonts and renderings. Settings too should probably be upper. Data storage, markup, libxml2, key files, JSON glib. Then we have GDA and GOM. Then we have an entire section networking with gsocket, Hawaii, libsoup. Libsoup is probably more important than Hawaii. But also we're missing like stuff like librest or whatever. I mean, librest is not wasn't maintained before this cycle, but now it should be back to be maintained. But if you have a remote service, like a remote web service that you're integrating with, libsoup and librest are probably more important to you than Avahi. Also, we only have the API reference, but we probably also want to have other things there. In the programming language section, we have C++ with documentation overview and GJS with the API references, GObject with the API references, GTK ARS for the Rust bindings so you get to the book, and Vala, the API reference. It's a little bit dry. But yeah. And I know people have been asking to add C to the available languages for language bindings, but it's not language binding, it's the API, so it's really hard to say, yeah, okay. What about HTTP request to Podman API through Unix socket? Not sure which lib can do this. I have no idea. By the way, hi Chipwill. I have no idea what kind of library can do that. Why is Podman using HTTP requests through a Unix socket? What the hell? That is such an odd way of doing stuff. I guess it's Go. And Go is kind of, I don't know. Yeah, the idea. When in Go you only have like the protobuf stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I have honestly have no idea what you could use for building a UI based on that. So, strictly speaking, the main library that can deal with that is libsoup, because libsoup is what we use for like HTTP. Let's see. And you can, I think, subsession new. I'm not entirely sure you can connect to, yeah, you can only connect to WebSockets, I think. I don't think you can connect to a specific, like a stream. Yeah. I'm not entirely sure you can do that with the existing libsoup API. Yeah, libcurl is scary. It's scary. Yes, it is. This is a good question, to be fair. I think it would be an interesting topic on discourse. Then we can get the libsoup maintainers to pop in and at the very least give an opinion. If you want to, yeah, go on discourse and open a topic. Ask there. You will definitely have somebody that can answer that question. Because honestly, I have no idea if you can do that with libsoup. Libsoup is the thing that lets you talk HTTP over a connection. But I don't know if there is API that lets you create a connection to any random endpoint and then on a Unix domain socket and then talk to it. It might be possible. But as far as I know, people use it mostly on remote servers, using any other connection there. Yep, I'll make sure to keep an eye on that, and then if it doesn't get a reply, I'll make sure to poke somebody. But yeah, if you tag it as soup or libsoup, I don't remember if, let me see. Yeah, there's a libsoup tag. If you tag it as libsoup, then the maintainer will very likely see it. I know he's monitoring it. So. Oh. Where was I? Oh yeah, people asking about like the structure of the website. And I think the website is structured right now. It has a lot of structure, to be fair. Maybe you should have less structure and be easier. It would allow people to find stuff a lot more easily. Yeah, maybe we need to, well, we definitely need to review this, because right now it's a word vomit. and I don't know how useful it is. And we need to add more links probably here and there. So not just the GTK API references, but probably like the website, the blog, and blah blah blah. So maybe it's what helps more people. Another thing that has been pointed out is that we are missing a couple of tutorials here that are currently living in the API references of other places, like oh come on. So GObject has an entire tutorial in the API reference, which is good, but it's also pretty much another word vomit. At the very least nowadays we have the sidebar that lets you skip to specific subsections. Before that you didn't have that at all. So was dire. But yeah, maybe we need a better tutorial for that, and have a tutorial here on the the beginner's tutorial, have a how to use GObject, how to define a new GObject, how to define a new GTK widget, and a bunch of other things there. And I also wanted to have the best practices inside the guidelines. So making GTK. So inside GTK we have or at least we used to have best practices. So we have a best practices wiki page, which hasn't been updated in a while. No, was updated by Andy in 2021, but before that it wasn't really updated. So instead of having this here, we should probably have a guideline here, like best practices for GTK and best practices for glib and stuff like that. I think also glib had best practices. Hi, Omdoc. I discovered most of Valadocs are old, unfortunately. Yes and no. I mean, yes, there are lots of old. There is a lot of old documentation. It won't surprise you, at least it shouldn't surprise you, that the documentation is old in general. That's the main problem. Or at least it's not the main problem of the free software. Well, it's not a problem of GNOME. It's a generic problem of free software. It's really hard to keep documentation up to date. I mean, the easiest way I found to keep the documentation up to date for GNOME right now is literally rewrite it. Because it's been... I don't think you've seen... I don't know how many of you have seen my talk at GWADEC last year. Basically, I did a roundup of the documentation, the developer documentation for GNOME, and the old developer documentation website still had documentation for GNOME 2 and GNOME GTK 1 and a bunch of other stuff that was completely useless in 2020 and 2021. So the easiest way to fix that was literally delete most of it. But there is a common problem across free software, it's really hard to find the time and resources to write documentation. Vala is another. Vala exists in an even more complex domain. Vala is a completely volunteer maintained language, which means that not only the language itself is maintained by volunteers, but also everything around it is maintained by volunteers, including the documentation. And there are very few people that contribute to Vala as a language, and the amount of people contribute to documentation to Vala usually do it to solve their problem and then just move on. Maybe they keep using Vala, maybe they stop using Vala. But in general, once they've written documentation goes away. But it's there, but it might end up being useless. So I think a lot of documentation in Vala has still been written at the beginning of GNOME 3, or at the very least over the past 10 years, and hasn't been kept up to date, especially with GTK 4 and GNOME 4. The only people that are currently using Vala in GNOME are the game maintainers. There are a couple of applications, and there is one library that uses Vala, which is libfolks for contact management. And that was a massive mistake. But yeah, that's one. Then we have a couple of applications using Vala, a bunch of games, like the small games using Vala. And then the only other people I know that use Vala are the elementary folks, because the entire elementary platform is Vala oriented. They have a lot of documentation there, but of course is for elementary. Luckily, we've gotten a few merge requests that update the documentation for our tutorials, and they add examples in Vala as well. So you can see every time there is an example, there should be a Vala variant of that. Let's see if we have another one. Yeah, like the themed icon also has a Vala example here. So ideally, every time we show any code example inside the tutorials, we should also have a Vala code sample alongside a C code sample and a Python and a JavaScript code sample. Hopefully more people will contribute there. The beginners tutorials also have the UI components examples in Vala and JavaScript and Python outside of C. I don't know if Rust will take over from Vala. A lot of people are writing Rust applications these days, and to be fair, I've also started writing a bunch of Rust code that is not just low-level stuff, but also I started writing an application in Rust using libadwaita and GTK 4. The template could use some refresh. I'm not talking about the GTK Rust template repository that I think Bilal is maintaining. I'm talking about the template inside GNOME Builder. That one is a lot simpler than the GTK Rust template, but it could do with a little bit more tweaks. I'll probably try and fix some of the stuff there. I really want to make the templates for GNOME and libadwaita, well, for GNOME applications in GNOME 42 a lot better, just so you can literally start from Builder and have a working application in multiple languages I'm also going to modify so the Python template is already, I've already updated it, so it's up to par with the other templates. The Rust template is kind of up to par. I mean, I was able to create an application and it worked fine. The JavaScript application template needs to be fixed. I think that's the only one. And the Vala application is also up to par. So in theory, by the time GNOME 42 is out, you should be able to install the latest stable version of GNOME Builder, create your template in whatever language you choose, and you get a proper GNOME 42 application. So libadwaita, GTK4, and everything is ready to be used. But yeah, Vala needs more attention. I totally agree. It needs more contributors. I mean, you cannot... The mantra, volunteer work is non-fungible. You cannot... is the original NFT. You cannot tell contributors what to do. Contributors do what the hell they want to do. So the only way to make Vala to make Vala more relevant is to have more people working on it. Possible to donate for Vala in stock only? Not really. I mean, you can donate your time by contributing, but there is no actual way to donate something for a very specific topic. Unless, I mean, you could contact the Vala developers and the people working on documenting Vala and then negotiate with them some kind of recompense or some sort of monetary value for their work, but there is no way to establish that kind of donation for a specific specific topic. So it's, yeah, if you donate to the foundation, you basically donate to ensuring that the Vala project still has a home, in the sense that it goes to infrastructure, it goes to organizing ACFests, it goes into organizing conferences and getting people over. But other than that, you cannot just donate to the foundation and say, I want my money to just be that. That is not entirely true, though. I don't know, if you have 10,000 euros, with 10,000 euros, you can approach the foundation and say, I want to donate this amount of money for a specific contract, and the foundation will organize the contract and then find somebody to work on that, like organize I don't know, the entire thing, so there is somebody that can do that. But basically you're essentially hiring somebody to do that. Yeah. The other thing you can do is donate your time and effort, contributing to the project. That's the only thing I can recommend to do. I can recommend doing. Okay. Right. So we can go to the saving file. I want to finish this lesson here because it's almost done. I actually managed to simplify it a little bit from the code that I used in the actual example that I did on stream a while ago. So it should be easier to deal with, easier to follow. The functions are shorter and on topic. You just need to add the last bit of the lesson, which is adding a key shortcut. So adding a key shortcut is essentially what we've done here. Where are you? Right. So yeah, we can recover this block and use it inside the lesson. Okay, so you open TextViewer application source file and find the instance initialization function for TextViewer application. Here, we add control plus KBD shift plus KBDS as the accelerator shortcut for the win save as action. Okay. And then we add it here. Set axles for action, the application. And then we add the key shortcut here. I actually did a typo there. I should fix that. So I need to fix that here because it's null terminated. I cannot skip that. And here. And I have to go back to the opening files as well to add null here as well. Hi, Gunnibert. It doesn't really matter. Well, it does for some stuff. For letters is not a big deal because the parser will turn them into the right thing. The actual problem is that the actual problems start if you're using symbols like this or this. At that point it gets dicey because it depends on the keyboard layout. I mean, let's say Control Shift 4 is a thing, but Control Shift S is another thing. On a US keyboard or a UK keyboard, these two are completely identical. But on other keyboard layouts, especially layouts like the weird geeky layouts like Beppo or whatever, or Dvorak or stuff like that, some stuff becomes different. The symbols are mapped differently. Okay, so this is not going to be 1822 anymore. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And then 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. And saving files is going to be the same thing, but now it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. 5, 6. 27 plus 6 is 33. And this one is step number 2. Okay, at the end of this list, you should be able to save the contents of the parent of the text viewer in select no 2. Open the select the save as menu item from the primary menu. Select a file in select the file and save the contents of the text sphere in the selected file. Okay, let's build it and see what happens. Out of range. Okay. Yeah, I need to double check that we are doing the right thing in a couple of places, but yeah. Okay. See. I also rebased the branch yesterday because I was reaching, I think, 25 commits that were mostly fix-ups, and it gets really impossible to see what you're doing. Let's see. Okay. Let's see how it renders, if I counted the lines correctly. I don't have a screenshot for this because it's hard to create a screenshot for this kind of operation. You're selecting a file to save into. There is really nothing to do. Same for the saving state page. Yeah, I briefly considered doing the... So the past stream, I think on Friday, I briefly considered the idea of taking the saving state lesson and not only saving the window state, so window size and whether or not it was maximized, but also saving stuff like the current file. So you close the window and you reopen it, and it reloads the last file you were using. I considered that, but there are a couple of complications there. The first one is, unless you are making a ton of assumption, well, not even making a ton of assumption, but unless you're taking extra care when you reload the state that the file is available and that the file is still readable and whatever else, then reloading a file from the previous session might be problematic. And I'm not entirely sure I want a getting started tutorial to go off the deep end in that regard. It's a complicated topic. Yeah, it deals with a lot of like failure states and failure conditions. The other reason why I kind of balked at the idea of doing that is that in order to save the state in that way, you have to save, you have to bind the property. Bind the property with a custom mapping, first of all, but also you have to create a property on the application, on the window or the application. In this case, it's exactly the same because the application and the window, the application only has one window. But in this case, but I would have to save the other property on the window, and then I'd have to move all the file loading into that property, which requires me going into the deep end by saying, okay, this is how you create a GObject, this is how you add a property, this is how you deal with property notification and changes like that. So instead of going that route, I am probably going to do a separate lesson or a separate tutorial on how to create your own GObject. And once I have a lesson about creating a GObject in C and other languages, I can probably go back and essentially say, okay, go here and look at how the properties are installed and managed inside your class. And after you do that, then you can come back and store state. But I don't think the getting started page would be, the getting started tutorial would be served well by that kind of depth. Because one of the problems that we have, I think, so this is what I want to do next. I want to write a tutorial on how to write a GObject, but not just writing a GObject in C, because that is trivial. And I say that not because I'm... No, let me qualify that. It's trivial to write it in C because the API is oriented towards C. So apart from the ungodly amount of boilerplate that you have to use and the verbosity of the process, it's fairly trivial. The API, you only have one API. You can only do one thing. And if you follow a tutorial that does that in C, there is pretty much the only way to do that. But doing that in other languages is kind of missing. The Python tutorial isn't really up to speed with that. The JavaScript tutorial has some bits and pieces. Vala is a lot easier, but Rust is a little bit complicated, but the Rust has a book for that. So, oh, hi Claire. Are there any plans to bring a more extensive Python GTK4 tutorial? That is a good question. In theory, the Getting Started tutorial should be ported to other languages. the complexity of doing that is caused by the fact that the set of instructions is kind of aimed at C at the moment, but it can be fixed. The other problem with Python and GTK4 is that Python is currently not entirely up to speed with GTK4. You have access to the API because introspection works. Everything works perfectly fine for, I'd say, probably 95% of the API. The main problem is that Python has a couple of blind spots in the implementation because it's an old language binding. Python is, the GObject bindings are, I don't know, 20 years old-ish. And they have been incrementally ported from hard-coded GObject stuff to using introspection. And the main problem with that is the fact that it's missing some of the API that GTK4 is currently using. So exposing low-level type instances like GTK event and GTK expression and the render nodes API. If you try to use them in Python, you fail because Python doesn't know anything about them. More modern languages, maybe Rust is a better choice for writing GTK programs. I don't know. Rust is a choice. It's a very popular choice. Vala is still used. As soon as elementary moves to GTK4, they will probably start increasing the documentation there as well. JavaScript is a good choice for writing GNOME applications. The JavaScript bindings are top-notch, and you know they are heavily maintained because GNOME Shell has to work. I don't know what else. I've seen other languages like popping up here and there, like Kotlin, for instance. In general, asking what language is better is kind of a it's kind of not a useful way to frame the question, because you have two options. Either you already know a language, in which case if it has bindings for GNOME, then use them and you'll be fine. You might end up in some non-idiomatic bits of the platform, in which case you will have to deal with that. Sometimes you will have to modify the bindings using an override or whatever. That's fine. That's life. If you don't know the language, so if you're learning a language and you want to use GNOME as part of a learning like launchpad, then again, whatever language you're choosing, as long as it has binding, then you'll be fine. So it's a subjective matter. I use Python a lot, even though I'm not a Python developer. I use Python a lot, but mostly I use Python for non-GUI stuff. I used to use Perl even for GUI stuff. To be honest, I'd have to. I really want to provide the new a new module for Perl bindings for GTK4 and libadwaita. I use Rust because I kind of like Rust. I've used JavaScript. I've used Vala. So the only language I haven't used is C++. Yeah, the C++ bindings are in a bad position though, because the current maintainer basically said I don't have time anymore. I'm not going to maintain the bindings anymore. So they're going to be there. No new feature. I think they have reached GTK 4.6, but there are no other bindings. So if people want to use C++ to write applications for GNOME, then they should contribute to the bindings. In general, the problem of the language is not the language, is the tooling around it. So you want integration with GNOME Builder, so you want a language server, you want like a way to do refactoring, and you want a debugger, you want profiling, you want documentation tools. At most, I can help out with the documentation. So at most, I can help out with tutorials for basically helping out people porting tutorials to other languages. Other than that, I don't have much more to offer. I'm sad to say. Okay, so saving state. Lesson you will be able to no. Name of this lesson is to illustrate how to define a new setting. New settings. Starting from their schema. Bind and bind them to properties on your window in order to save and restore the size and state of the window across different sessions. Okay, so first of all, add new keys to the settings. Settings are stored in a database, and each key is described inside a schema. The schema contains the type of the value associated with the key, as well as the default value. Okay, so first of all, we need to open up the G schema. Okay. Open the example text viewer G schema XML file under the data directory. Yeah, the schema is here. The name of the file is this one. Okay, so we need to add window width, window height, and window maximized keys to the schema, including their default values. So here we have then we're gonna emphasize the lines. This time we're not gonna fudge the type of the maximized Boolean key like we did on stream the other week. So it's gonna be 1, 2, no, it's gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sorry, 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Curl can generate code with libcurl flag. Oh, what cannot curl do? There is a reason why I don't use it. Can do too much. The schema will be installed. Let's add a node. Installed automatically by the GNOME button when building the application. And installed in the expected directory building application. This means that the application can only be run once it's installed. Yeah, this is it's kind of a note, but it's not really important for people using GNOME Builder. But if you're doing this from another IDE or whatever, you have to install the application, because otherwise the schema will not be visible, and a missing schema is fatal to the application itself. So once we added the keys to the schema, oh, thanks for the follow, Cleum. And you are the 130th follower. Oh, hi, Daddy. Yeah, let's go. Let's go to 140. Okay, so the next step is going to be adding the GSettings to the window. So we need to add the GSettings object to the text viewer window instance structure. These for out specific schema ID and is no, you use the GSettings API to set how to access the value of the keys, as well as get notified of changes in the settings. Okay, so first of all, open the text viewer window. Let's see. Modify the text viewer window instance structure to include a GSettings instance. So this is an example of how of the problems that you have when dealing with porting this code to other languages. I mean, I could easily use the same description for C and, I don't know, Python. The instance structure is kind of C specific. It's kind of a way of describing this using the C nomenclature. But it would be trivially easy to say add a field to the text viewer window instance to that contains the GSettings instance. But in other cases, I would have to put the entire this entire point inside a tab, and I have a tab that says, like, if you're using C, follow this tab. If you're using Python, follow this tab. It would be kind of clunky to do, because in some cases, for instance, it would be even more complicated, because I would have probably a few different points for C and then maybe a single point for Python. In Python, I would not need to do a couple of or let's say I'm writing in Rust. In Rust, I would probably use closures instead of using a complete function for some of the callbacks, for instance. So a couple of these points that apply to C would not apply to Rust. So it's then I would have like tabs, and instead of having like code tabs, I would have literal tabs and then code blocks inside tabs. Maybe like a few points, a few steps inside the list would be added in C, and maybe 1 in Python, and maybe 3 in JavaScript. I don't know. It's gets weird. Oh, we actually didn't look at the... let me see if I can get the render of that. So... this one is correct, this one is correct. And this one is correct. Yeah, no, that's fine. Okay, dogs. So, the third step is modify the instance initialization function for text viewer window init to include to create the GSettings instance for the GNOME example text viewer schema ID. And that one is going to be yeah. Now saving files is the latest version, so yeah. Yeah, we need to check that in the instance initialization function we create the settings here. The binding is going to happen later on, so we are going to do that at the bottom of the instance initialization function. So we're going to do something like this. Settings, GSettings, new. But now we also have, okay, we need to emphasize the lines here. So it's going to be 81 to 99. 19. The next step is going to be freeing the memory from self settings. The default template doesn't have, I need to open up here. I need to open up the template inside GNOME Builder to double check, because I've modified enough time. I modified the base template in enough times in the text viewer that I have to check what is the baseline. So it's gonna be window GTK4. No, Windows C. Okay. The class in it doesn't have a finalization function, so we need to modify the class in it to override the dispose. Let's override finalize. In this case, it's pointless to override dispose. So modify the class initialization function for text viewer window to include hi Mersh. You're streaming from a Wayland or XOR session. Right now I'm streaming from an XOR session. Because I'm running an NVIDIA on an NVIDIA GPU on this machine, and I'm also running on Fedora Silverblue 35. I don't have the very latest version of the NVIDIA drivers, and I'm not entirely sure I want to test OBS to that extent. Also because I'm running OBS from Flathub. As soon as GNOME 42 is out and I can update the Fedora Silverblue to 36 and OBS to the latest version, then I will definitely switch to the Wayland session and see what happens. At worst, I will fall back to X11, but right now I feel there are too many moving parts in this equation, and I don't want to. I want to be able to stream, and I don't want to be debugging a bunch of stuff. As soon as I can, though, I will switch. I don't like X11 anymore. I I want to go back to Wayland. I've used Wayland for like 10 years probably. I started using Wayland pretty much immediately because I've always had Intel GPUs on my laptops, and I've also started. I was one of the few people that saw the first Wayland prototype in 2009 when Christian Augsburg was still hacking on it, and the only thing that you had were a flower that had a complete alpha transparency and a terminal which was pretty much a console there. Anyway, it was good fun. But yeah, I'm probably have been watching Wayland for the past 13 years, so, and used it pretty much immediately. It would be very interesting plugins for Vim NeoVim for feature facilitated development of GNOME apps. If you are happy with GNOME, with Vim, I totally support having plugins for that. I know I sometimes use Vim for Rust development, and I'm pretty happy with the integration of the Rust toolchain inside Vim. So they're at the start of the worst drama ever to hit the Linux community. I was in the middle of every single drama the Linux community over the past 20 years. I've been in the middle of it. I was there when GNOME 2 was released. I was there when GNOME 3 was released. I was there when Wayland was started. I was there when Pulse Audio started. I was there when System D started. I've been basically talking to the people that changed the landscape of the Linux desktop for the past 20 years. So yeah, I'm Linux worst night. Yeah, probably. Oh. I mean, I started a podcast about the history of all these events. So the reason why I haven't finished the history of GNOME podcast is because, well, there are two reasons. One is very complicated to find all the information from primary sources, in part because a bunch of stuff disappeared from the internet, and in part because a lot of the discussion happened in places where it wasn't entirely public or accessible to the public, because of the amount of grief and the amount of pain involved with people parachuting themselves into forums and into places where contributors hang out just to drop their 2 cents of uninformed positions. So a lot of the stuff that was discussed, even before GNOME 2 was released, was discussed in semi-private mailing lists. They are now mostly public if you know where to find them, but it's really hard to actually discuss this stuff in public. And over the years, it's gone a lot worse. People have moved to other like chat platforms and other messaging platforms, because if you do stuff in public like we want to do, you get trolled on one side by people that have absolutely no stake whatsoever in what you're doing. And the other problem is that you get scooped by other people that want to generate like clicks and impressions. So you will get, you will start designing something, you'll start implementing something on your own like you used to be able to do like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And suddenly you will have articles made about it. It's really hard because you're doing something, some prototype. Can you imagine Christian doing the initial work on Wayland on his own, and then like after the first 10 commits where stuff is held together by a bunch of hopes and dreams, it gets an expose on Phoronix or any other like random platforms or Reddit, and people start like insulting him because he has the goal to replace X11. It would be insanity. Nobody would be able to do anything. And then yeah, oh yeah, you have an issue tracker that is public, and suddenly people brigade the issue tracker and just leave completely uninformed comments there that are essentially useless, because they don't have the context or don't have the knowledge, or they think they have the knowledge but they don't. So it's basically, these days, writing free and open source software in public is incredibly complicated. It's a lot worse than it used to be 20 years ago when I started writing free software. It's a lot of people I know just write code on their own like private repositories, and they announce it at the end of the process because it's impossible otherwise. Yeah, people are completely entitled. Like, I'm doing this stuff for free. Well, not this stuff in particular, but the streaming I'm doing it for free. I don't have any financial incentive to do like streaming like this. But I'm doing it because I want to do outreach. So I'm putting this stuff in public. But if I were to write the documentation for GNOME on my own and my volunteer time, I would definitely not do it in public, because otherwise I would have backseat driving from basically the entire internet. And that's one thing. The other thing is, if I were to write any replacement for any part of the stack these days, I would be destroyed even before I publicized what I was doing. It would be impossible to do any free software development in public. I don't know. I don't know what happened. At some point, I don't know what happened. I don't know, maybe we got successful and people started thinking, they are owed anything. Like it happens for celebrities or anything. Like there's a, I don't know if there's some parasocial like relationship going on where people that use the software that we write suddenly think they are our friends or our bosses, and they can tell us what to do, or they can leave criticism, which is hilarious to me, but it's also really scary. I mean, it used to be the case where people leaving feedback were leaving feedback because they were using what you were doing and they had constructive like feedback. So I have a bug and I maybe have a fix, or I am testing this stuff and this is what's happening and I need to fix it. But these days is entirely unprompted. Like I'm doing X and somebody on the internet will arrive and say, but what if you did Y? Well, do Y, otherwise fuck off. Free software is zero cost subordinate. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely... there is a little bit of I'm not entirely sure that we failed to put clear boundaries. And I probably am going to be controversial here, but I think a bunch of people actually don't want to put clear boundaries because they enjoy the status of being in public, of being a free software developer. Like it gives them some sort of status. They enjoy the position there. And you have one problem there. And the other problem is that particular, in some cases, this is done like the superstar hacker, right? Like you're a Linux kernel hacker, so you must be smart. No. First of all, no. Second of all, what? But that feeds up the ego, basically, saying, okay, I'm hacking on this, so I am smart, so I deserve to be listened to. And that is interesting. That is a dynamic that is interesting, because it provides a clear incentive on that, on being visible, on being on LWN quotes, and essentially being seen as, if not representative, but being seen as a visible part of the ecosystem. And that feeds the ego. And one thing that is not entirely people don't understand that the goal of free software, contributing code to free software, is to have your code completely removed by the end of your lifetime. People think I wrote a bunch of code and this code is going to exist 50 years from now. If that happens, you failed. That code does not need to exist 50 years from now. If it exists 50 years from now, you should have written COBOL. It means that there is technical debt, and you have been contributing technical debt instead of contributing code. Instead, people like actively seek out that particular reward because it feeds the ego. And if there is one thing that software developers have in abundance, is ego. But that conflicts with the idea of free software. Free software is software that destroys your ego because you have to be open to other people reviewing your code, merging your code, changing your code, removing your code. So it's there is a tension there, and I think a lot of people are missing that particular side of the equation. They are concentrating on having their ego stroked, instead of removing the ego from the equation. Yeah, I don't do that because I'm not interested, or it's not a problem I have, therefore I'm not motivated. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. That is, again, that is another thing that comes with the removal of oneself from the equation, because then you don't have the incentive to be at the center of the entire thing. If it doesn't solve my problem, then I'm not in any way responsible for fixing this stuff. I fix it if I experience the problem or if I'm interested in the problem. Otherwise, there is no incentive for me to do that. And yeah, a lot of people need to do that. The first thing I said when I started GI.Gen was literally, if I don't care about this feature, you will never see it implemented. If it's not for the GTK API reference, I will not add it. I will not add any feature that makes stuff more complicated for me. So yeah, you're free to take it or you're free to leave it. I don't give a shit. And it worked. People know exactly where I stand. If I add a feature, it means that I find it useful for the GTK API references. If I don't add a feature, it means I don't find it useful. You might decide to propose it for inclusion, write it yourself, and do stuff like that. But you first have to ask yourself and me, is this useful for the GTK API reference? Yes, then I'll consider it. No, then, well, there are other tools for that. And yeah, I think that is the healthy approach to all of this stuff. I wish more people understood that. I wish more people figured out that just because you put out code in the wild, you're not on the hook for everything that it does. The licensing terms say it's provided without any implied warranty or any implied functionality or safety. So whatever, you're not on the hook for everything that happens to it. And yeah, more people should understand that. Include finalization function. The text your window finalize function will be called when the text your window instance is going to read. So code block scene. Okay, let's go back to the window. I need to go. Not the application here, but the class in it. Probably cursor position was the last one that I had to modify. Yeah, it's this one. So saving state, it's here. And then we do GObject class finalize viewer window finalize. So we have to emphasize lines 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. In the text viewer window finalize function, which clears the object, clears the GSettings instance, and chains up to the parent implementation. I need to put another line here. So it's going to be deployed text viewer window finalize here. The object class text viewer window parent class finalize object. Ah, come on. And gclear object self settings. Hi Jeff, and welcome. Okay, so we create the instance here and we clear it here. Now we have to skip to the next section, which is bind the settings to window state properties. So keys inside GSettings schema can be bound to GObject properties in a way that bound keys will be saved. Bound properties will be automatically saved inside the settings database whenever they change, and will be restored at creation. So it's very easy. There's just one step. Modify the text viewer window instance initialization function text viewer window init to bind the window width, window height, and window maximize keys to the default width, default height, and maximized properties respectively. So, code block. See, and then we go back to this. I have a code tab here that is absolutely wrong. Hopefully I didn't do another code tab earlier. Okay, we go here, we copy the whole thing. So we can remove the duplicate code block here. This one will need after that. And then we go here and we copy this. And that's pretty much it. So this one, it was line 19, 20. So it's going to be from line 21 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 29. Okay. This lesson, you have added keys to the GSettings schema associated with your application and manage the lifetime of the GSettings object and GSettings instance by tying it to the application window and bound the keys in the GSettings database to the state properties of your application window. This should be enough. Okay, let's build them and see if something breaks. Seems to be working. Let's do another fix up commit, and then we can push it to the merge request. And we should see if it renders as we expect it to render. Oh. Yeah. We should have a proper tutorial for GSettings. Like not a beginner's tutorial, but have a tutorial in the section here. Like we have a tutorial for menus, and a tutorial for literally saving the state. Because a lot of people have problems with that. A lot of people do not understand schemas, for instance, or do not understand that schemas have to be installed and have to be compiled into the system. I do not want to add an explanation of how GSettings works inside the getting started tutorial, because that would bring the flow of the tutorial to a screeching halt. But having a proper tutorial that explains how to add a schema, how to write a schema, how to add it to the build, how to install it, how to tell the build system at the end of the process to run the schema compilation tool, then how to create a schema, how to bind settings, how to set and get values, a section on conditionally loading schemas. So if you have a plugin system, you want to have settings that apply only to the plugins that have been enabled, so they will be installed in specific places, not in the global schema namespace. But since plugins might be installed or not, you have to conditionally load the schema without aborting if the ID isn't found. Also, basically just write a documentation to say, do not look at dconf. People confuse GSettings with dconf all the time. I don't understand why. Dconf is literally nowhere. It's an implementation detail, but people have heard about dconf at some point, and now they're convinced that everything is running under dconf. It's not. It's not. Your system is using dconf. Very likely. If you're using GNOME, you're using dconf for your system settings. Your application, especially if it's sandboxed, your application may be using dconf, or if it's sandboxed, it's not even using dconf. It's all GSettings. It's all there, and nobody uses dconf directly. Okay, let's see the render. So tutorials, beginners, getting started. Content view. Yes. Okay. Loading content from a file. Yes. 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 And okay. Okay. Again, this is update the title of the window inside the opening files. Update the title of the window. The first block is missing one, so it's gonna be 39. And the second block is fine. Okay. Then showing the cursor position. Okay, the emphasis is correct. Here, here. Emphasis is correct here. Okay. Saving the content of a file. The emphasis is correct. Here as well. And this is correct. This is correct. This is correct. And then saving application state. Emphasis is correct. That is there. I'm missing an emphasis here. Text the use GSettings. Okay, I need an emphasis here. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Setting the emphasis here completely wrong. Oh, great. So this is 19, this is 20. This one is correct. This one is fine. and this one has to be offset. So it's going to be 22 to 230. So okay. So another fix up commit. Okay. I think I thought that because dconf editor can access GSettings. Dconf editor is a special application. Dconf editor uses GSettings and also uses dconf directly. So it uses GSettings because all the schemas you see, all the key description, the default values, the type, and everything else, the structure, it's all inside GSettings schemas, and the schemas exist only at the GSettings level. dconf has no idea about schemas at all. It doesn't know about the types of the values, doesn't do validation, doesn't know about descriptions or anything. dconf is a dumb storage that only does what you tell it to. So if you're saving a string value for this key, it will take it and store it. Done. Won't do anything else. The validation, the default value handling, the fact that some stuff hasn't changed or has changed is all done at the GSettings level. So dconf editor is called dconf editor because it touches dconf, but everything that you see in the UI is built on top of GSettings. So it will show you the structure of the GSettings. And then it can also deal with dconf internals in a sense that it can reset all the values to the default, which is an operation that is available at the dconf level. And the way it works is when I say reset to default, it will not know the default and then change the value inside the database to match the default. It will literally remove the keys and the values, because at that point, when you're using GSettings, GSettings will extract the default from the schema because it accessed that. If you reset a key or a path in dconf and then you query the values of that path, it will return nothing because there is nothing there. So that's what resetting to default means. It means literally blasting the current state of that key or that path. And that is the difference between GSettings and dconf. But again, dconf is just a backend. It's just a dumb storage. It can be replaced with. It could be replaced with anything. It could be replaced with a SQLite database. It could be replaced with a key value any-like type, which is what the sandboxed applications like Flatpak application use internally. They don't use dconf. They use an any-like file to store their settings, because there is no need for anything else. There is no need to have shared settings if your application is sandboxed. It's actually counterproductive to the entire point of having a sandbox application. Back in the day, we had to have a hole in the sandbox to let applications install their settings globally. But these days it's not necessary anymore, because they can install their settings inside their own sandbox, and then they can use the portal to read global settings. So dconf literally at no point in the application, in the sandbox application lifetime, dconf is even a factor. So I do hope that at some point people will stop talking about dconf. I mean, I know the reason why a lot of people are confused by that. It's because back when we introduced dconf, inside that is because people with an agenda and an axe to grind started saying, oh, dconf is like the Windows registry. Meh, meh, meh. Yeah, it's entirely dumb to compare to Windows registry. Just, yeah, they're both binary storages. Like, yeah, well, duh. But they're binary storages because it's more efficient that way. If you have an entire session of components that are reading the exact same keys at startup, it's entirely dumb to have those settings inside of a text file. It makes everything slower to load, especially on spinning Rust. It makes everything harder to synchronize, because if you have a bunch of components that watch a key that can change during startup, you want to have the fastest notification possible, not file monitoring, and who knows when the kernel will notify you that something has changed. So the fastest way to do it is a binary blob. It's a binary database that you can map inside your process. Yeah, but most people that usually moan about the fact that, oh, GNOME is using a binary database, and not a text file. It's not Unix if it's not a text file. I have no idea how modern systems are actually put together. So okay, saving the application state. Okay, good, and good. Huh. I'd say we have a beginner's tutorial. Yeah. We have a whole application now. Did we update that? Loading content from file. That was the last one that had problems with the emphasis. Okay, this is correct. This is correct. Good. Okie dokes. So we can now rebase and auto squash. Of course. They're getting started. Where are you? Here. Okay, now if we reload. Okay, that's fine. Okay. So let's force push. And let's go to the merge request here. Right, we have fewer commits now. We keep the structure clean. And we are done. So we mark it as ready. And then we merge the pipeline when it succeeds. And we will have a getting started tutorial now. Yeah, it's missing the add weight to specific bits, like the toasts and the dark mode selector. Those I will add once we have GNOME 42 released and we have the libadwaita inside the runtime, the stable runtime, and then when we have the updated templates for GNOME 42 inside GNOME Builder using add weight application instead of GTK application. Okay. But yeah, once we have that, the merge request should be merged. Yeah, it's still running. Yeah, once the merge request gets merged, then everything gets rebuilt and gets published on the developer.gnome.org website. So we'll have it in a few minutes. And yeah, once that happens, we will finally have a getting started tutorial on the GNOME developer documentation website that tells you how to write a small GNOME application from scratch. Well, not from scratch, from the baseline of the template in GNOME Builder. This is nerve-wracking. Always so... Yay! It's merged. Okay, the pipeline is running. Still have a few merge requests open. I'm fixing the style here. Why didn't I see this? Oh, this is weird. There's another merge request that should be merged into. Ah, yeah. This one should be merged as well. Yeah, this is one of the things I wanted to work on for later. I'm not entirely sure I'll have time to do this or I'll continue doing this soon on stream, maybe later. Basically extracting all the code examples and the XML like into separate files so we can run some sort of validation process on them. So we ensure that we do not go out of sync. It's going to be a long process. And I still have to figure out a way to make it happen, in a sense that I have no idea how to do. I can validate probably Python. I already have a Python environment because I'm using Sphinx, so I can probably do linting or using PyFlakes, but of course I cannot validate against like GObject or GTK, because in order to do that, I would need to load some sort of information about the API that I'm using. PyGObject does name resolution at runtime, literally. So you have an object, you ask for a method, and then PyGObject will look inside the introspection data for that method, for that name on that instance, and then if it's valid, it's going to be fine, otherwise it will bail out. But it's all done at runtime. So in order to do validation, I will have to load the entire namespace and then validate that everything is correct, instead of running it. Otherwise, the other option is running it. For C, I would literally need to compile everything. But in order to compile everything, I'd have to put stuff inside a bunch of boilerplate code. And I only want to show a specific subset of that API. That gets complicated and gets complicated fast. XML, I can probably validate against the schema, but even then gets complicated because properties are resolved at runtime as well. And we don't have a schema for every property that we have inside GTK. We only have the structure of the schema. We have only the structure of the XML, but not the properties or the values of those properties. I would literally need to write a bunch of code examples, build them all, and then run them to verify that they actually work. But that's complicated to do when running a GUI, because then you have to run it under a windowing system, and then you have to understand what does it mean if the code is actually running. I'd have to take a screenshot, compare it with another screenshot of a running code. Suddenly, I'm not testing the developer documentation. I'm literally testing GTK in multiple languages as well. So it gets out of hand really quickly. So let's go to developer documentation. It should be the new version. So tutorials, beginners tutorials, getting started, and here we are. So now we have our getting started tutorial published on the GNOME developer documentation website. Oh, well, that was a lot of work. But it seems to have worked fine. Yeah, what we need to do now is basically fill out the UI components list. And then we will be able to have a bunch of other things here that we can link to. So people can read them, and then more tutorials, essentially. So yeah, as I was saying, a GSettings tutorial is probably it would be a good thing to use to use, sorry, to write. Another thing to write would be a best practice for writing GObject and writing GTK widgets. We already have an accessibility guideline, the localization guideline, maintainer guidelines for writing applications for GNOME. Like, there are a bunch of other things that need to be written there. Yeah, the style guidelines, but yeah. Other than that, I think we are at a very good place now. So, it's also been 2 hours and a half. So let's transition back to my big head. And here we are. So today we finished the getting started tutorial. Well, at the very least, we finished the first phase of the tutorial. So we have an application that we can, well, we have a guide that lets us start from GNOME Builder, generate the template for GNOME and GTK4 applications, and then incrementally build functionality inside that application to have a different UI, load files, update the UI whenever the file or the state of application changes, save the content of the file, and then saving the state of the application whenever the size of the application changes, for instance. Which is good, because now we have a baseline. We have a way for people that are interested in starting developing for GNOME that they can use to then build their own application on top of that. We need more examples, and hopefully as soon as GNOME 42 is out, we can add libadwaita functionality. The example application that I wrote on stream like 2 weeks ago made use of toasts, which are an interesting new functionality inside Adwaita, and also made use of the style manager, so you can change the application to use the dark style, to force the dark style instead of using the system style. The system style will automatically be used whenever you install GNOME 42 and decide to switch to the dark mode instead of using the light mode. But you can also force the dark mode, and for that we need libadwaita and the style manager API. But adding those two lessons is going to be a lot easier now that we have a baseline. And after that, who knows, maybe we'll have a new application on top of that, like a small image viewer or something less intensive, or maybe we'll modify the text viewer to do more stuff, like adding search and replace, for instance, or modifying the text viewer, the text view, and use GTK source view to do like syntax highlighting, for instance. That is another thing that can be done, and it's part of the GNOME platform, so it's a lot useful. It's a lot more useful than just a simple text viewer. Anyway, I think it's a good time to stop here for today. So let's do the outro for YouTube. So we finished the getting started tutorial today, and if you want to watch me writing more documentation and more code examples for the GNOME developer documentation and platform, then feel free to follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/ibasi, or you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, So you will either see me live on Twitch or see me in the VOD the day after I stream. So I stream on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I upload the VODs on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. But otherwise, if you are interested in this, just remember to follow and subscribe. Also leave a comment on the YouTube video if you have questions or if you have comments on there, and press the like button so that the videos get more visible in the eyes of the almighty and all-knowing YouTube algorithm. If you're still here, then thank you very much for following along, and I will stream again on Wednesday. I haven't decided yet. Probably will do the GObject tutorial at this point. So if you're interested in the details on how to write GNOME applications that aren't just reusing existing widgets or objects, then join me on Wednesday. And then have a fantastic rest of the day. And I will see you all on Wednesday. Bye.